Greetings, this is Amy Wentley, and I'm with Chai Knuckles Knitting, and this is episode 2020-09, Colorwork, two-color stranded knitting. So I'm teaching a Zoom class right now, since we're in the middle of the pandemic, and I can't be doing classes at the Hillsborough Yarn Shop right now. So I am doing a knit-along on the Busta Beanie, and that's a stranded colorwork hat. And I'm doing a 4-session class on that on Zoom. And this video is for my students in that class as a refresher on how to work two-color stranded knitting. So let's jump in. I'm going to be using two colors here. This is a darker kind of rusty color and a gray. And I'm going to be knitting with two colors to make some patterns here. And so I'm going to be using a chart that comes with the pattern that we were working on in class. It's the Busta Beanie. It's by Gundren Johnston. And this is the chart. Let's go over the chart first. You might not be familiar with how to read charts, so I'm going to go through that for you right now. This is the chart for the main color work in the hat. There are actually three colors being used here. There's a main color, that's the white in the background. There's a contrasting color 1, which is gray, and a contrasting color 2, which is this darker gray color. For the purpose of this practice for my students, I told them they could just use two colors if they'd like, a main color, and they could use the one contrasting color for both of these, just to get the practice. So the way that you read this chart is the stitches are across the bottom. So this is 1 stitch, 2 stitch, 3 stitch, 4 stitch. And then we have rows 1 to 14, or rounds, because we're going to be knitting in the round. We're going to be going in a circle. So we're going to read this chart from right to left on every row because we're knitting in a circle and we're always working in that direction. We're not turning our work at all. So to read this chart, you go to the first round, and your first stitch will be a contrasting color stitch, followed by 3 main color stitches. Then when you get those 4 stitches done, you go back to the beginning and you do 1 contrasting color and 3 main color, then 1 contrasting color, 3 main color, 1 contrasting color, 3 main color, till you get the whole round done. So this is a 4-stitch repeat. So I asked my students to get some worsted weight yarn that they have at home, 2 contrasting colors like I have here, the gray and the rust. And I asked them to cast on a multiple of 4 stitches because there are 4 stitches in our chart here. I wanted them a multiple of 4 stitches on their needle. So I have 72 stitches on this needle, and that is 18 repeats of this 4 stitch here. So 72 stitches. So we cast on 72 stitches. We worked 4 plain rounds in stockinette stitch. That's knit every round, so that we got a nice little base there. And then we'll start practicing our color work. Okay. So why don't we jump into that? I've got my knitting here. And on this chart, my first thing to do is to add a contrasting color stitch. That hasn't been added yet. So here's my yarn. Here's the end of my yarn. Okay. What I'm going to do with that is I'm just going to make a little loop out of this. Just like this. I'm going to go ahead and pick up my needle, and I'm going to insert as if I'm going to knit. I'm going to loop this yarn over the top and just pull it through. So that's how I handled the very first stitch. You want to have enough yarn left over to be able to weave in this end with a tapestry needle later. And this is the yarn that you're going to be working with, and you're going to hold that in your right hand. So have the yarn, the contrasting color yarn, you're going to be holding it in your left hand. I'm sorry. Have the contrasting color yarn to the left side. You're going to hold this in your left hand. And so we've got that first stitch done. Now we've got to get the second, third, and fourth stitch done. These are all main color. So I'm going to pick up my main color yarn here. And if you knit English style or American style with the yarn in your right hand, this is very comfortable to you. You're just going to go ahead and you're going to knit 3 stitches. If you normally knit continental, what you want to do is hold this yarn. Sorry about the camera. I'm sorry about that. It's going to wiggle for you a little bit. I'll try not to do that again. You're going to hold this in your right hand however it's comfortable. You can pick it up, you know, kind of underhanded and pinch it here. You go ahead and put it in as if to knit, and you wrap the yarn, the right hand yarn, around and pull it through. And you put it in again, wrap the right hand yarn around and pull it through. So here you've got one contrasting color stitch right there and 3 main color stitches. Now it's time to do your contrasting color stitch again. Now if you turn your work over, you'll see that your contrasting color was back over here 3 stitches ago. And this yarn needs to go across the back of your knitting and into the next stitch. That's called a strand, and that's where the term stranded knitting came in. So you're going to strand this yarn across the back, and you want to make sure that your main color stitches are spread out in your right hand needle here, so that you have this strand in the back coming across loosely and going to knit your next stitch. Now, for the contrasting color, you're going to be holding this in your right hand. If you're a continental knitter, go ahead and hold it however you're comfortable with. If you're not familiar with using yarn in your left hand, what I normally do is I do an overhand grip on my needle. So my yarn is just laying under here and my hand is over it. Then I take my pointer and I find that yarn and I put my pointer finger under the yarn so that it's sticking up there. And all the rest of this yarn back here is being just held by my overhand grip on that needle. So I've got the yarn coming across the back of those 3 main color stitches, and I'm going to go ahead and insert my needle as if to knit, and I'm going to scrape this light colored yarn off my finger on the back from top to bottom. Scrape it, and I'm going to pull it through that loop, and that's my contrasting color yarn. And if you look at the back of your work again, you'll see how that yarn stranded across the back. You want this strand to be loose. You want it to be comfortable. If it's too tight, it pulls in your knitting, kind of buckles it, ruffles it. It won't lie straight. It won't look good. And it also won't fit because it'll just be too tight. You won't be able to actually stretch the hat. So you want to make sure that this strand in the back is loose. So now it's time for me to work on my main color again. So I'm going to go ahead. I did 1 contrasting, and I'm going to do 3 main again. So I take my yarn from my right hand. I'm going to push this in as if to knit, and I'm going to spread these stitches on my right hand needle just to keep things loose again so that we don't have things pulling too tightly. And I'm going to knit 1, 2, 3 stitches. Okay? And again, I want to pull my stitches on my right hand so that they're far apart. And this contrasting color yarn that I'm holding in my right hand here is going to run across the back of those 3 main color stitches in a long strand, and I'm going to catch it and look in the back there. Always check in the back, make sure things are loose enough. Make sure it's a little loose. You're better to err on the side of loose than too tight. So I've now got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, a contrasting, 9, and then 3 main, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so one piece of information I want to give you about markers. Okay, this chart has a repeat of 4 stitches. If you wanted to, you could put a marker after every 4 stitches so that you know that is 1 repeat. And that's a good way that you can catch mistakes, because if you come to a marker and you knit a contrasting and you come to a marker but you've only worked 2 main stitches and you're hitting a marker, you've missed a stitch. You know that you're off on your pattern. Now, sometimes when you're new, the first times you're doing this, you might want to mark every 4 stitches so you know that's your repeat. If you're comfortable though, you can also mark a multiple of 4 stitches instead. If you don't want to move that many markers, if you think you can, handle 12 stitches instead of 4, I've finished 12 here, 3 repeats. Contrast, main, 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 contrast, main, 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 contrast, main, main, main. And I'm going to put a marker here. So I'm going to make the decision to mark after every 12 stitches. And that way I can just make sure that I'm on pattern and things are going well. So let's look at this one more time. I put my marker here. My next stitch is going to be a contrasting stitch. So I'm going to use the yarn that's in my right hand that I just grabbed overhand, put my pointer finger under. I'm going to go ahead and grab that stitch and I scrape it off my finger, pull it through the loop. So that's 1. And then you're also stranding this main color yarn, but it's only stranding 1 stitch. You have to be careful. You don't want to pull that too tight, but you don't have to be as particular about stretching out your stitches for that 1 little stitch. So 1, 2, 3. And let me do it for you one more time. Contrasting. 1, 2, 3. And always remember, when you go to do that contrasting, make sure you spread your stitches out on your right hand needle. Then go ahead and do that contrasting one, and you'll see how it strands in the back. See how nicely the strands are coming up? And then do 3 more. And so here I am. I reached 12 stitches again. So I'm going to place another marker for myself. Okay. There you go. Okay, now just a couple other words of advice. When you knit stranded knitting, one of your colors, on every row you'll have 2 colors, okay? One of your colors is going to be the background color. One of your colors is going to be the dominant color, okay? The contrasting color. You want to hold your main color yarn in your right hand, and you want your dominant color to be in your left hand, your contrasting color. And it has to do kind of with the physics of how the yarn lays and how it wraps and twists around each other. But essentially what that does is it makes sure that this contrasting yarn pops and doesn't recede to the background. So you want to do right hand main color, left hand contrasting color. Okay, that's important. Now, let's say you're trying this and you're working with 2 hands, and maybe it's hard for you because you're just not used to working with that other hand. If that's the case, then there's some other ways of doing this that you can explore. And I'm going to talk about them just a little bit, but you'll probably have to do research on them yourself with other videos on YouTube or such. One of the methods that you can use is you can hold both of your yarns in your left hand with a digit separating them. So what you would do would be you would do the overhand hold like I showed you before, slip your index finger under there, and sometimes people will slip another digit under there, like maybe their thumb. Okay. You can tell I don't do this normally, but you can hold both yarns in the one hand and you scoop the contrasting and then scoop the main off your left hand like that. And main and main. One thing you're going to want to do if you do this, you'll notice that I have some of my contrasting colors peeking through down there. You're going to want to make sure you pull that so it doesn't poke out in the front, and it's laying there in the back. See? So that's one possibility of something you can do. Another possibility that you can do is you can get a tool. It's called, this is by Addie, it's called a knitting thimble finger ring. And this ring fits on your left hand. You actually, before you start your color work, you thread your colors through that ring. And then you pick the yarns off the ring, essentially. There are videos out there that'll show you how to do this. It's a nice option if it's something you want to try. One other thing that you can do too, and this takes a little longer, but it works real well if you're comfortable with it, is you can knit every round twice. Okay? And you only use one color each time you go around. So, sorry again for knocking the camera. There we go. And what you end up doing is, let's say I knit English and I'm going to hold this in the right hand. What I would do is the first time around, the first time I do the round, I will only use the contrasting color, and I will knit with that. So I'll knit the one contrasting color, and I will slip the stitches that don't get that color. So 1, these were supposed to be main, 2, 3. I spread them out, and then I'm going to go ahead and knit that contrasting color. And I want to make sure that I have my float back there, my strand. Sometimes they call them floats, okay? And then I will slip 1, 2, 3. I will spread out those main color stitches, and I will work the contrasting color. And I will slip the main, and I will work the contrasting color. Okay? I will do that all the way around. Okay, I won't do that now because that'll take a while for you. But what happens then is when you do the next round, I'm going to go ahead and move these stitches back. And we're going to pretend that I worked all the way around, and now it's my time to use the main, to work with the main color, okay, because I finished the contrasting color, and it is, where's my main color? Okay, is all the way 3. Okay, this is where I left the main color before. My contrasting color is all the way down here again. But so now this time I'm going to slip my contrasting color because that's been done already. So I slip that, and now I'm going to go around this round again, only working the main color. So I knit 3 with the main color, slip 1, knit 3, whoops, I slip 1, knit 3. Now this is a little more to keep track of because you have to do every round twice. So you need to make sure you keep track of, have I done this yet or haven't I? So now we're caught up. The other choice you have too is, if you're an English knitter and you're just not comfortable with using both hands, what you can do is you can drop and pick up the yarn every time. So this takes a lot longer, but if it's the way that you're most comfortable and you do the best work with, then any way you achieve this is the way for you. So what we're going to do now is, it's now time for a main color. So I'm going to knit 3 with the main color. And all you want to do is you want to make sure you always grab your next yarn the same way when you do this. So I knit with the main color, I spread out my 3 main color stitches, and I'm going to reach under the main color, get the contrasting color, and bring it over. So that's 1. Then check and make sure your float's good back there. That looks good. And then you're going to drop that yarn and pick up the main color yarn for 3 stitches. And then you can drop that yarn, reach under, bring the contrasting color over, and work 1. You're going to reach under, bring the red color over, and work 3. So that's your last option. I would suggest that you try really hard to use the 2 hands. I think it's really, for me personally, it's been the quickest, most efficient way to do it. Try that and know that you're not going to be perfect at this first thing out of the gate. It's a new thing that you're learning. Whenever you learn something new, you're not going to be perfect at it the first time. So just be patient with yourself and try doing this with 2 hands. And I've got a couple of follow-on videos to this one about different cast-ons for the Boosted Beanie project. And I also am going to have a video on how to join stitches to work in the round. So please look for those, and thank you for watching this video. See you soon. Bye-bye.